Let's bring on the Mountaineers. Goes around about after 50, the 10 to 5. A touchdown with Virginia. He did it. He did it. Left with White. Beaverson. He's gone. Touchdown. Tavon Austin. As the hills of West Virginia resound with the sounds of Golden Blue football.
They want to have a 7-on-7 drill. We want to make it a fist fight. Nothing cheap, nothing dirty, but West Virginia football.
From the heart. Streaming. It's Mountaineer pride. Leave no doubt tonight. No doubt. They shouldn't have played the old Golden Blue.
West Virginia is a special place. People are the state that have great pride in this WV logo.
Ain't no stopping the Golden Blue.
It is a great night to be a Mountaineer wherever you may be.
What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome into another live stream here on the Country Roads Webcast channel. October 30th edition here on Halloween Eve, bringing back, of course, our weekly snap count stream where we talk about the injury updates for West Virginia that have come out since Neil Brown's press conference, talk about the snap counts from the previous game, and then using those two pieces of information and, of course, a little bit of guesswork. We'll project out a depth chart for this coming week for WVU. As we know, they haven't really been releasing too many this season. So, of course, it's something I always try and track and keep up with on my own anyways. So, try and project one out every week for you guys here. So, we'll try and put one together for BYU here towards the end of the stream. But we'll lead it off with the injury updates here momentarily. Before we do, right at the top here, want to encourage you guys, as always, throughout, drop any questions, comments, concerns you got there in the chat, and I'll touch on those throughout the stream as well. I know it's a West Virginia win, so plenty of positive things to talk about and maybe a more positive outlook for the rest of the season, but would love to know your all's thoughts on how the Final Four games could now go for West Virginia. Has your opinion changed after they secure a win over Central Florida, snap what was a 2-game losing streak and get back on the winning side of things? And I thought it was a valiant effort in doing so, especially on the offensive side. They really have shown some great things there in recent weeks. So excited to talk about who all got involved on both sides there once we get into the snap counts. But before we do, I want to lead it off with the injury report. And we know we did suffer some injuries in this game. The biggest of those and possibly most impactful of those potentially would be Doug Nestor. Seems like we can't really keep our offensive line at full strength yet this season. Finally get them back. You know, this was the first game we were going to finally have them back at full strength really since, since before TCU, I believe. And then, of course, Doug Nestor plays, less than 20 snaps and gets hurt. And unfortunately, not the best news on him. As you see here, this injury update actually coming from Golden Blue Nation. I've been sharing their updates on this here on these snap count streams every Monday. They've been doing a good job covering the injury report coming out of Neil Brown's press conferences. And in terms of Doug Nestor, the guy I was just talking about there, the starting right tackle for West Virginia, seems like, unfortunately, he will be missing this upcoming game against BYU. Neil Brown said he's doubtful for this game. Lower leg injury is what he suffered there against UCF. Believe he had a boot on the sideline, if I'm not mistaken, after the game. So hopefully it doesn't seem like it's long-term, but does seem like it will keep him out at least one more game. As we know, he missed the majority of that game against UCF as well. But Hudson Clement, the wide receiver that missed that game for West Virginia. We saw E.J. Horton get to start, make some plays for West Virginia, as he's been one to do in recent weeks. Also, a fellow freshman, Traylon Ray, the true freshman receiver that's been playing a lot for West Virginia this season, went down against UCF. He was the other injury that West Virginia suffered in that game to go along with Doug Nestor. Seems like both of those guys are on track to be healthy and will play Saturday night in Morgantown against BYU, as that is now a night game. We learned that Sunday as well. 7 o'clock kick coming up for BYU. So fun to have another night game in Morgantown, and should be a great atmosphere as we welcome one of the Big 12 newcomers there to Mountaineer Field. As I said, Clement did miss that UCF game due to a leg injury. Ray went down in the second half. Both will be returning, as will hopefully, it sounds like, Hershey McLaurin, who, you may notice last week on this stream, we didn't report on his injury because that was something we didn't learn of until later in the week. I believe it was on Neil Brown's radio show Thursday that he, let go the information that Hershey McLaurin would miss the game and that Jaffa Veras would miss the game. So a lot of people were already concerned about West Virginia's defense going against UCF's offense heading into that game, and then that really just heightened the level of concern there when people heard that West Virginia was going to be without their starting spear, especially when we know of Lance Dixon's status no longer being with the West Virginia football team. We're thin there. You slide Marcus Floyd over, you play Raleigh Collins a ton of snaps, and both of them played well and filled in there admirably, but you need Hershey McLaurin moving forward if you want to have sustained success, I think, and even play better on defense than what you did against UCF, because you did do a good job of being opportunistic and forcing turnovers, but some of the defensive plays still left a little bit to be desired. They still missed a good bit of tackles and things like that, and Hershey McLaurin was really starting to play some really good football before his injury, so glad to hear that Neil Brown said he's hopeful that Hershey McLaurin can return for the game against BYU. Did not get an update on Jaffa Veras, so hopefully, be good news on him. Don't know the status of that one. And then lastly, of course, Andrew Wilson-Lamp missed the game. Seems like he's set to return. But then Grayson Malashevich was the other surprise player that was out for the Mountaineers against UCF. Reserve wide receiver, plays a lot on special teams, but his most important role probably on this team, kind of goes unnoticed a bit, is being the holder for, the place kicking for the Mountaineers, and he was out this past week, and Neil Brown said he will be out again. Hopefully not going to be long-term. Should only be out just this next game, but West Virginia will be utilizing a new holder for the second straight week. Leighton Bechtel looks like he's going to handle those duties, but did a good job of doing that last week. West Virginia was perfect on their extra points and their field goals, so didn't really miss a beat. So it was something that personally I didn't even really notice until it was brought up in Neil Brown's press conference today that Grayson Malashevich wasn't out there holding. So I hope to have him back soon, but there's a bit of an update there on the injuries for West Virginia coming out of that UCF game as we now look ahead to BYU this upcoming week. Let me take a swig of my coffee, and I'll catch up on any comments we got in here before we move on to the snap counts here. Timothy Green, appreciate you, man. Always loyal to tune in and chime in. Great Mountaineer fan there. Says he always enjoys the Country Roads webcast, always has great content and even a little comedy once in a while. Let's go Mountaineers. Hey, let's go Mountaineers indeed, Timothy. And yeah, usually it's just bad jokes and bad attempts at humor, but every once in a while something lands there. So it's like a solar eclipse, right? It's very rare, but when you see them, it's always special. So there's rare times when the comedy does hit. It's always fun, Timothy, and I appreciate you being here and being a part of it. When it does happen, and, same goes for everyone else. And encourage you guys, drop your thoughts in the comments there in the chat throughout. I'll touch on any of your comments here as we go throughout the stream. I'm going to switch over to the snap counts now. We're going to detail the snap counts for West Virginia on offense and defense against UCF, but encourage you guys, drop any thoughts you have on the game, the West Virginia football season, or anything you want to talk about there in the chat. I'll address those here throughout, but let's get to the snap counts now here. Starting off on the offensive side here, Garrett Green, of course, going the majority of the game for West Virginia, 75 snaps. Nico Marchiol did get the one other snap for West Virginia on offense. They had 76 offensive snaps in the game. Garrett Green, that one snap that he missed, he went down, and it looked like that ankle that we knew had bothered him, that he injured first against Pitt. He's had it wrapped up, ever since then. He even played against TCU, not at 100%, and went to run. I think he scrambled out on a play, if I'm not mistaken, was about to be sacked and kind of got rolled up on, and it looked pretty bad. I kind of thought it myself, oh man, Garrett just re-injured his ankle. This could be the turning point in the game and perhaps the rest of West Virginia's season with how good he'd been playing. But, being the tough customer that he is, he shook it off and came right back in. Only missed one play because the play that he went out of there was a third down for West Virginia. I believe it was a 3rd and 8. Nico had to come in cold off the bench. So you're wondering what's West Virginia going to do? They got to kind of throw this football. It's 3rd and long, but you don't want to put Nico in a bad situation coming in cold off the bench like that. So you kind of want to do something safe, but what's safe is a screen pass. And so you think UCF might be expecting that. So how do you combat that? West Virginia designs, a hook and lateral off, the screen pass. And it was a good design too, because it was a tunnel screen West Virginia used a couple of other times in the game. One of which for, a 28-yard gain for Preston Fox. But you give the look of that tunnel screen, a play that West Virginia utilizes, and you set up the lateral coming off of it. Unfortunately, when Preston Fox laterals that ball, Jalen Anderson's not able to handle it, and it was the only turnover West Virginia had on the day. But that was the one snap that Nico Marchiol did get in the game for. So, his one snap, he completed a pass. But as far as the quarterbacks, you get 75 snaps for Garrett Green, 1 snap for Nico Marchiol. Moving on to the running backs, where Justin Johnson got the start for West Virginia in the game, actually. First time C.J. Donaldson has not started for West Virginia this season. I think Chad Scott said, today, and C.J. Donaldson as well kind of confirmed that it seemed like they were sending him a message, and it certainly seemed like he got that message and received it in a big way and bounced back. Kind of a bit of a resurgence for him. One of the better games he's had this season, if not his very best performance. Coming off the bench there, his very first play in the game was a 4th and 1 for West Virginia, and he broke off, a 30-plus yard run off the outside there and really performed well. Ended up, pacing the snap count. West Virginia has said they're going to feed kind of the hot hand there last week. That ended up being Justin Johnson, led to him getting the start in this game. But then C.J. Donaldson got the hot hand throughout, as did Jaheim White. So those were kind of the guys that West Virginia featured in the game. C.J. Donaldson led in snaps with 39. Jaheim White next in line, as I said, there 20 snaps for him. Heck of a performance for Jaheim White. You guys know that's my favorite player. Love that guy. So can't sing his praises enough. And he really looked the part out there, looked super explosive, and seems like hopefully he's doing those things in practice that they talked about that's going to allow him to play more in the games, because we really need him out there. He's super explosive. Then Justin Johnson, as I mentioned, got the start, played 19 snaps. And then Jalen Anderson did get the 1 snap in the game. Good to see him get back on the field, because we knew he was in the doghouse since that snafu against Houston, where, he had the pass in the end zone, should have been a touchdown. Instead, it ended up an interception because it went through his hands and Houston called it off the tip. But the sad side of it now is the one play that he came in for, of course, was the play that I just talked about, where they set up that hook and lateral. You can say what you want. There's not a lot of things to criticize, I think, in the play calling in this game. I thought it was a very well-called game by Neil Brown, very well-designed game plan by him and Chad Scott and the staff. But if there's one thing you can criticize, I guess, it's why I have Jalen Anderson in there on that play to, receive that pitch when you've got, C.J. Donaldson playing so good. Jaheim White had been playing well. You'd been doing some things for Rodney Gallagher. So I don't know exactly why they thought that Jalen Anderson was the guy to go to on that 3rd and 8, cold off the bench as well to go alongside Nico. But for whatever reason, he was the running back they put in. And it's really just the worst luck possible for Jalen Anderson, because, like I said, hadn't seen him since that play against Houston. And the time we finally do see him, he fumbles away, a great chance, because the play was well designed. It was open. He was going to at least get the first down for West Virginia, if not more. But he can't handle the pitch, fumbles it, and that was the only snap we would see him in this game. And maybe a while before we see him again. And you hate to see that, because he's a talented guy, but can't make those type of mistakes, especially when you've been on the bench because of a mistake that you just made a couple of games prior. So very tough break for him, but he did get the 1 snap in the game. And then moving on to the wide receivers, Preston Fox led the way actually with 52 snaps and thought he really performed well. I mentioned that tunnel screen on that hook and lateral. He did have, a 1 mishap on it, but it wasn't necessarily his fault. He really got blown up coughed up the ball on, I think, the third time they tried to go back to that tunnel screen. Luckily, Thomas Remack was right there on the spot to recover the fumble for West Virginia because it happened when they were in the red zone. But other than that, just a solid performance all around for Preston Fox. He's been the punt returner all season. As of a couple games ago, took over as the kick returner as well. So you'd love to see him, make a great play on special teams. He's been very consistent there, and that's one thing you can say about Preston Fox's game, I think, is the consistency is usually there with Preston, and had some good plays in this game. Mentioned the nearly 30-yard gain on that screen, and led West Virginia in snaps at the position, playing a little bit more outside than he has, throughout the earlier part of the season as they've moved Devin Carter inside, and it's helped him a bit. Preston Fox has kind of played a bit more outside, and they kind of move him around and switch him back and forth between inside or outside, but leads to him, leading West Virginia in snaps at the position with 52. Traylon Ray was next in line, getting the start outside there, 40 snaps before he went down for injury, and I think he's going to continue to be up there in the wide receiver snap count depending on how he heals up from said injury, especially, you see him up there in this game as West Virginia was dealing with not having Hudson Clement in the lineup. So you saw a lot more Traylon Ray, and of course you saw a lot more E.J. Horton, who you see there getting 29 snaps, made some good plays in the game for West Virginia. The standout one to me being on a fourth down in the red zone. I think it was 4th and 2, 4th and 3. West Virginia lines up under center, but it's a play-action rollout for Garrett Green on a bootleg, and you find E.J. Horton on a crosser, and a well-designed play, picks up 13 yards, gets a fourth down conversion for the Mountaineers. So it shows their confidence in E.J. Horton there to, go to him in a critical situation and a critical fourth down there that they really needed to get. And I love the designs by West Virginia against UCF because we know they had some really good pass rushers, Morris Brash, top of the conference in sacks, near the top in TFLs, and he didn't get any sacks in this game against West Virginia. I don't believe they did have one, but I don't believe it was Morris Brash. And West Virginia, got Garrett Green out of the pocket a lot of rollouts, bootlegs, and things in this game for him. And I thought that worked out well because Garrett Green, throws on the run really well, so it worked out good for him. So it was a win there. And then it's really a win-win because you kind of neutralize the UCF defensive ends as well on that pass rush. So great design there. And on one of those rollouts, he hit E.J. Horton for a nice pickup. And E.J. Horton, as I said, 29 snaps in the game. And then Devin Carter, 31 snaps, kind of been the go-to guy on the outside for West Virginia early in the season, and then really started even being more successful once West Virginia moved him inside a couple of games ago. And, getting snaps there in this game. He had 3 big catches that were all on third downs, all for, third down conversions for the Mountaineers, 3 catches, over 40 yards. Good performance, did have some drops, I know that, but on the crucial scenarios when West Virginia needed to go to someone, they went to Carter, and, it paid off for them. And then Jarrell Williams, actually, this was probably the most surprising thing for me to see on the snap counts, was actually Jarrell Williams outpacing Rodney Gallagher III in snaps. 17 for Jarrell Williams, 14 for Rodney Gallagher III. And it's surprising because I remember seeing Jarrell Williams on the field, but, West Virginia never really targeted him, whereas Rodney Gallagher, it seemed like West Virginia targeted him, at least a handful of times. So it seemed like he really had a lot of snaps in the game, but only played 14 snaps, and Jarrell Williams actually ended up being out there for 17. So, Rodney Gallagher's role is increasing, but Jarrell Williams' snap count has been increasing in recent weeks as well. So who knows, maybe we'll see him start hauling in some receptions or something in the near future. And then, of course, the 2 tight ends West Virginia is playing remains the same there. You get 68 snaps for Cole Taylor. Believe he led the Mountaineers in receptions in this game. And, of course, 40 snaps for Traylon Davis, who does a great job assisting West Virginia in the run blocking, pass blocking aspects of things. And, don't rule him out to, sneak out and really make a play in the passing game soon, because we know Cole Taylor is the one that the opponents are focusing on, but Traylon Davis does a great job as well. The offensive line, this is where you get a bit of a shakeup, obviously, because of the injury to Doug Nestor. And shout out to Nick Malone, doing a great job, being that kind of reserve offensive lineman for West Virginia, that swing guy that can play either tackle position. We saw when Wyatt Milam was out, he was playing the left tackle. And then when Doug Nestor goes down in this game, he has to play right tackle for the Mountaineers. Does a great job, only has really one mishap where West Virginia gave up that lone sack on a third down. But other than that, really filled in admirably. And the same can be said for Jaquay Hubbard, who has played a lot of snaps for West Virginia this season as well. I feel like I missed him on the snap count. I know he was in the game some, wasn't he? Yeah, I forgot to throw him in here on the snap count. Let me go ahead and add him in here real quick. to the snap count list. Don't know how completely let him slide through there, but anyway, 76 snaps for Wyatt Milam, so good to see him go the distance now that he's fully healthy for the Mountaineers. Same goes for Zach Frazier, another 76 snaps, playing every snap for the Mountaineers. Best center in the country, in my opinion, and has a chance to really be awarded as such at the end of the season. Could be a Remington Award winner, which Dan Moses back in 2006 won that award, and it's the only major award a West Virginia player has ever won on the football side, because we know Stedman Bailey was robbed of the Blitnikoff, among other Mountaineers who have been robbed. But Frazier has a chance. I think he'll be up for that award at the end of the season, or at least he very well should be, or it'll be another travesty. But we know the NCAA has robbed us plenty in the past. Brandon Yates, 70 snaps. Thomas Remack, 67 snaps, And, I think a lot needs to be said about Thomas Remack, because I mentioned him recovering that fumble. That was a big play. But you look at West Virginia's run game in this one, the most rushing yards they've had in quite some time, especially against a Power 5 opponent, 286 rushing yards. And, going off that left side now, they seemed like they really went back to that in this game. And I think that was because you finally were at full strength on that side with Remack and Wyatt Milam back. And I think, having Remack back went to, a big part of that, because you saw you had Milam back, but you didn't have Remack. And when you get them both back, you really start dominating on that outside zone to the left. So we know Wyatt Milam's amazing setting the edge. Neil Brown's talked about him maybe being the best player for the West Virginia offense this year. But I think, Remack is probably the most underrated West Virginia offensive lineman, in my opinion. And then I mentioned Nick Malone doing a great job filling in the past few games for West Virginia. Had to do it a lot at right tackle in this game. Played 59 snaps. And then Jaquay Hubbard, 21 snaps, alternating at the guard position there with Brandon Yates. And then Doug Nestor, 19 snaps before his injury. Seems like he will miss this game against BYU as well. You hate to hear that, especially with it being a home game. So, one more time, Doug Nestor gets one more chance to perform at home, though. So hopefully he'll be back by the time West Virginia plays Cincinnati there on Senior Day. In the penultimate home game, though, he's going to miss it against BYU, it sounds like, after getting the injury after 19 snaps against UCF. And then Sully Weedman getting in on the action for a couple of snaps there on offense for West Virginia. So those are the offensive snap counts. Let me see if we got any comments in here I'll catch up on, and then we'll switch over to the defensive side and update the snap counts on that side. Timothy says he thinks we'll win 3 out of our next 4. I like that optimism, Timothy. I think West Virginia certainly has a great chance to do that. And, I, for one, maybe it's the gold and blue glasses that, I like to throw on sometimes, Timothy, but I think that there's a good chance that West Virginia could win out. They got a good chance against Oklahoma, in my opinion. And, I don't just say that because Oklahoma just lost to Kansas and UCF played them well, but I say that because West Virginia has played well in Norman against Oklahoma in the Neil Brown era. You look back at 2021, and West Virginia played them very close. Arguably was, a bad snap away from potentially even winning that game or having a chance to kick a game-winning field goal anyway. And I would obviously think that this year's team is better than that 2021 team was, in my opinion. So I think West Virginia has a chance in that one as well. So your prediction certainly not that far-fetched, and I hope that West Virginia does win at least 3 out of the final 4. And it would be great because I predicted us to go 8-4 preseason. So, they win 3 out of the next 4. That'll be their final record. It'll make me look good, right? I'm all for that. He says he thought it was a great play, just poorly executed, and thought turnovers really helped us. I agree, man. A lot of people have talked about a bad time to break out that trick play, and I get it because it is considered a trick play, but really it was a relatively safe trick play because all you're doing is completing a screen pass, and then it's a simple, pitch to a guy that's essentially right there beside of you. The fact that he bobbled, it was just bad luck, to be honest, and the turnover certainly did really help us. First time West Virginia's won the turnover battle in a Big 12 game since, Baylor of last season, so certainly was well overdue for that to happen. I mentioned going into the game, BYU was 13th in the conference in turnover margin, so thought that was an area where West Virginia had a chance to capitalize, and they did just that, and they really needed to because it was a back-and-forth game, and that was ultimately the difference. Not only getting turnovers, because, at times West Virginia has done that this season, but they hadn't always, turned it into points. So I think getting the points off turnovers was just as big, Timothy, for sure. Appreciate you, Timothy, and appreciate everyone else that's in here live as well. Whether you're in here live or tuned into this on a playback, you can do us a favor, help us out a lot just by hitting the thumbs up button, giving this video a like. Really helps its performance, and it'll help future videos performances here on the channel as well. And if you're a West Virginia fan, Big 12 fan, college football fan, be sure and subscribe to us here as well. Helps us, helps you, helps get more of this Mountaineer sports content out to Mountaineer Nation. And encourage you guys, drop any questions, comments, concerns you got there in the chat, and I'll touch on those throughout. But in the meantime and in between time, let's get back to the snap counts. And before we get to our projected depth chart for the week, we got to finish up with the defensive side of the snap counts here this past week for the Mountaineers. And we'll start that off on the defensive line, where Steady Eddie, as I like to call him here, Eddie V, paced the way, 40 snaps to lead the defensive lineman. Sean Martin not far behind, right there next in line with 39 snaps. Then you get 32 for Mike Lockhart, 27 for Jalen Thornton, 24 for Day Hawkins, most snaps I've seen him play in a while. That's good to see. 21 for Fatorma Mulba, 14 for Tomi Durajaye, 12 for Asani Redwood, and 6 snaps for Hammond Russell to round out the defensive line there. And then moving on to the bandit position, where you get 43 snaps from Jared Bartlett, 30 from Tyron Bradley. Those have been pretty much the two that have played there exclusively throughout this season for the most part. For West Virginia, that remains the case in this one. Then at the linebacker position, you knew Caden Bizer was going to get some snaps for West Virginia this week. Neil Brown mentioned that in the lead up to this game in his press conference, that they were going to get him in early. They held true to that, getting him over 20 snaps. And I think that that's a good thing, and it could be even more beneficial when and if you get Ja Faveros back, because then you have 4 linebackers you can potentially play, which would give you a chance to spell, both Koba and Cutter at, times if you need to. But the fact that you at least have one reserve you're playing right now is good. Getting Bizer some snaps. Austin Cave is back to a point where he's healthy, so maybe that means he can be a contributor there in the near future as well. So, you've got a chance to maybe have some reserves at the linebacker position, which is something you need. We've talked about the lack of depth there on the back end for West Virginia, and then, of course, the linebacking lack of depth as well. We've talked about that in recent weeks since the loss of Trey Lathan, to add to, the loss of Trotter earlier, prior to the season starting. But West Virginia's had to combat that with, Lee Koba playing a ton of snaps, and then Ben Cutter in recent weeks doing the same. But they're able to spell Cutter with Bizer some in this game. Lee Koba still plays over 70 snaps, played 72, but really performed well throughout this game. Ben Cutter, I thought, played his best game of his career to this point in his 45 snaps. And then Caden Bizer, that I mentioned, 26 snaps in the game as well. And then the spear position. This is where it was going to be interesting to see what West Virginia chose to do here, because we knew Lance Dixon was no longer with the team. And then, a couple of days prior to the game, we learned of Hershey McLaurin's injury and that he would not be able to go. So it left you wondering, because West Virginia has been thin at deep safety. They don't really have anyone to back up Aubrey Burks and Anthony Wilson, but Marcus Floyd. And you also knew that when West Virginia, needed to play someone at spear that wasn't Hershey McLaurin or Lance Dixon, it had usually been Marcus Floyd in a nickel position. So you were wondering, what's West Virginia going to do? Well, they decide to, play Marcus Floyd there at the spear pretty much like they have for the majority of the snaps, kind of got to start there. And then how do you combat that if you need to spell some snaps at safety? Well, you slide Malachi Ruffin back there, because we know he has experience playing safety in the past. So that's what West Virginia did for a handful of snaps against UCF. Malachi Ruffin played a few snaps, the deep safety, and when he did, Jacoby Spells came in at the cornerback position to, spell him. And the spear was held down by Marcus Floyd, and, of course, Raleigh Collins, the youngster they're trying to work into the rotation there as well. So you get 47 snaps from Marcus Floyd and 31 from Raleigh Collins there. Then at the cornerback position, you get 69 snaps from Beanie Bishop Jr., and what a phenomenal game from Beanie. More on that here in a second. Really, 2 interceptions, and he's really been a standout for West Virginia. Maybe the most underrated transfer addition West Virginia brought in this offseason. Then the aforementioned Malachi Ruffin, 61 snaps, and Jacoby Spells, 17 snaps. Talked about him playing some when Ruffin was out, got in on the action a little bit all around, and really, looked a lot better than other times when we saw him this season. I know he made some big plays last year. He was one of the highest rated recruits, if not the highest rated recruit in last year's class. So a guy with a very high ceiling and a ton of potential. And I thought in this game, you really saw him look the part, and he made some good plays and really shown some good coverage skills. I think he graded out pretty good in PFF as well. And really, played well in his 17 snaps there to get in on the action and get on the rotation. And it's good to see because Beanie Bishop and Malachi Ruffin need a break at times, as do Burks and Wilson, as we've talked about the depth or lack thereof on the back end. And speaking of Burks and Wilson at the safety spots, 69 snaps for Burks and 67 for Wilson playing those two positions. So that rounds up our snap counts here on our snap count stream for West Virginia, talking about the offensive and defensive snap counts there against UCF. So now using the injury update that we talked about to lead off the stream, the snap count info there, and then a little bit of guesswork. Going to provide you guys my projected depth chart for the week here momentarily. But before I get to that, I did want to share this that was released today from the Big 12 Conference. And, of course, West Virginia football shared it on their social media, mentioned Beanie Bishop, and this involves him. That's why I said more on that in a second. And it's him being awarded by the conference. Awesome to see Beanie Bishop get awarded Conference Defensive Player of the Week and Co-Newcomer of the Week as well. So multiple conference awards for Beanie Bishop following his 2-interception performance against UCF. Believe he had multiple pass breakups as well and really put on a show out there defensively for West Virginia. Has been a ball hawk this year and, has given West Virginia something they hadn't had last year, and that was someone that really, forced takeaways. West Virginia only had 4 turnovers as a team, or 4 interceptions, as a team last season, and Beanie Bishop so far this year has 4 of his own. So that's awesome to see. And, following a game in which he had 2 in one game there against UCF, the Big 12 Conference awards him Defensive Player of the Week and a Co-Newcomer of the Week in the conference as well. So pretty cool stuff there, and had to share that with you guys for Beanie being awarded, and rightfully so. So now we'll get to my depth chart projection for the week. This kind of how I think things will look for West Virginia against BYU now that we know who may be out for the game, and using some of the snap count info from the previous game to look ahead to this game against the Cougars and how the 2 deep may look. But as I pull that up and take a swig of my coffee real quick in the meantime. All right. Not too many changes this week. Like I said, mainly at this point in the season, the only changes that are coming up for the most part are injury related. Quarterback's going to remain the same. Garrett Green, first string. Nico Marchiol, second string. Running back here is where you get a little bit of a change. I think last week I had C.J. Donaldson or Justin Johnson listed as the starters because, after that game against Oklahoma State, thought they may turn to Justin Johnson to start. They did indeed do that. But then, in this game, as I mentioned earlier, you saw C.J. Donaldson kind of have the hot hand. And because of that and because of his performance as well as because of Jaheim White's performance, I think C.J. will be rewarded and will start again against BYU. And I think Jaheim White's going to be the running back that gets, the next most reps and is probably the next in line to come in for the West Virginia Mountaineers. Although I don't think Justin Johnson will be totally out of the mix. I almost put him there with an or beside Jaheim White, but I think Jaheim White's going to get a little bit more work. So I'm going to go right now with the running back position. CJ first string, Jaheim White second string this week. Then at the X receiver position, we get another change because Hudson Clement, as we said, expected to be back in the lineup. So, last week I had Preston Fox on the outside there. Starting, as an or with E.J. Horton. This week, Hudson's back. I think he gets back in the starting lineup there at the X receiver position. E.J. Horton spelling him there as the second string guy. Mentioned Devin Carter moving inside. So finally, a couple weeks ago or last week, I believe it might have been, moved him there on our depth chart here on the CRW. So got him starting at the inside receiver position for West Virginia. And then the other guys that get reps there, of course, Rodney Gallagher and Preston Fox. And then the other outside receiver, I think Traylon Ray, if healthy, will get the go there for West Virginia. And sounds like he will be good to go. So we'll keep him in there first string. And then I mentioned Jarrell Williams, really getting more snaps in recent weeks. So he remains here on the depth chart. Tight ends, talked about it being Cole Taylor and Traylon Davis. No surprise there. Left tackle, Wyatt Milam back in the lineup. Great to see. Nick Malone, he's been the swing guy for the Mountaineers. So, I think if anything was to happen, I think he would, move over there to the left side, and West Virginia would maybe slide out, Brandon Yates to the right tackle spot if they needed to do something different there. As we know, at right tackle, Nestor is going to be out for this game against BYU. Left guard, of course, Thomas Remack back there. Got Brandon Yates backing him up. So as I do, Brandon Yates the backup to Zach Frazier at center as well. Yates, your starting right guard. We know he's been subbing in and out there with Jaquay Hubbard. And then at right tackle for this game, I mentioned Nick Malone. I think he'll get the start for West Virginia with Nestor out as expected. And I've got Johnny Williams, the true freshman there, listed as the second string player at the right tackle position. Flipping over to the defensive side, defensive end, still got Sean Martin and Tomey as the two guys there. Defensive tackle, haven't changed it up. Still Eddie V as the main starter, and I still got Orr in between the names of Redwood, Day Hawkins, and Jalen Thornton, because all three of those guys have played similar snaps. It's just varied each week as to who's played the most snaps, but it's been, those three guys getting the snaps there. You saw Jalen Thornton make a big play this week to get a fumble recovery on a Lee Koba big sack there, and then Day Hawkins, paced the snap count, which was the first time he's done that in a few weeks. So I just keep the oars in between the three names there because those are kind of the guys you're going to see. And then at the nose tackle position, obviously it's been Mike Lockhart and for Torma Mulba all season there for the Mountaineers. Same goes at the bandit spot. As I mentioned, it's been Jared Bartlett and Tyron Bradley, and they've both been getting a lot of work there and even playing together at times. Talked a bit about the linebackers earlier and the depth or lack thereof at that position, but Ben Cutter's been getting work at the Mike linebacker position as a true freshman and is really starting to play well. Last game, as I said, probably his best game yet. And then you get Caden Bizer, the former walk-on, now scholarship player, doing a good job there in this game. In his 26 snaps, he'll continue to spell Ben Cutter there. And then the will linebacker, Lee Koba, obviously the guy that's going to play the most snaps for the Mountaineers and kind of the guy that makes it all go there for the defense. And we'll see about Jaffa Veras' status for this game, but still got him there second string for the time being. Hershey McLaurin expected to potentially return, so he moves back in to the depth chart here to start at the spear position and really was playing good football prior to his injury, so hopefully he's able to return to that form that he was at. And then, of course, at the second string spot, I've got Raleigh Collins or Marcus Floyd, as we saw with McLaurin out this week. Those were the guys that got the work there. Cornerbacks, one side we got Beanie Bishop, backed up by Jacoby Spells. The other side we got Malachi Ruffin, backed up by Wilson Lamp, although it looks like Jacoby Spells is really in recent weeks the only one that's gotten on the field as a reserve player at the cornerback position. Wilson Lamp had really only been playing special teams, but didn't make the trip for West Virginia this week. Is expected to return for BYU. And then at the safety spot, mentioned Aubrey Burks as the starter at free safety, having a great season overall since his return from his injury. Back up there, Marcus Floyd, and then cat safety Anthony Wilson. And then, of course, the second string there, I put an or in between Marcus Floyd or Malachi Ruffin because we've seen both of those guys, get work there at times this season, and both could potentially fill in there if necessary. And, of course, kicker and punter remain Michael Hayes and Oliver Straw, respectively. Mentioned Preston Fox now back on kick returns as of a couple of games ago. He's been back there with Justin Johnson. He still remains the team's punt returner. Long snapper still Austin Brinkman. Holder had been Grayson Malashevich, been out with injury this past game against UCF, going to miss BYU as well. So you got Leighton Bechtel there as the holder for some of the specialist positions. Not listed here on the depth chart, but that's my projected depth chart for this week against BYU. I'll scroll back through it slowly as I take a swig of my coffee here so you guys get a look at my projected depth chart for the week for the Mountaineers. Barring any, surprising injury news like we were hit with last week on Neil Brown's Coaches Show on Thursday, this could potentially be how it looks for the Mountaineers this coming Saturday night. All right. There we go. Appreciate you, Forrest, always being here, tuning in and chiming in. He says, missed the first hour, medicating and feeding cats. Hey, no worries, man. I know that's a full-time job in and of itself right there. I appreciate you hopping in here for the second half. And hey, that's what the playback's for, right? Sometimes people catch, more on the playback even, and that's okay too. I always appreciate that. Did I find any snap counts for Mallinger? I did not, but I didn't look at the snap counts for special teams. I can pull those up really quickly and see the special team snap counts. I usually only just update the offensive and defensive snap counts here, but I can check out special team snaps probably. Well, it's not, I can't get PFF's not loading right now, of course, when I need it to, but I'll have to update you on that later, Forrest, if I can get a chance to check it out. But offensively and defensively certainly wasn't there. I know that Mallinger has been dressing, though, in recent weeks, as of, I believe, a couple weeks ago. So glad to see him, at least healthy enough to be dressing. And if he played on special teams, then that's a good sign. And that's an area where he can certainly be effective for West Virginia with his speed. So glad to see him getting on the field, and wouldn't mind to see, him work into the receiving rotation at some point, Myself, like you, Forrest, I think you've kind of spoke of this in the past, was surprised with the lack of depth in the defensive secondary, especially now at Spear having lost Lance Dixon, that they haven't shifted him back over there, because we know he played there, initially coming in, but I guess they really feel like he just didn't work out there, and they think he's going to be a better fit on the offensive side. But I am glad to hear that he, is back dressing, and sounds like he may have played some on special teams as well. So good to hear. I wish I could get PFF to pull it up right now, but of course it wants to act a little funky. Let's see. I don't know why. It's so strange. It usually pulls right up. Of course, right when you need it to, right? Always problems live. His Forrest says media never asks about him or Austin Cave. I know it's hard to get an update on either one of those guys. I've only heard him ask about Austin Cave a couple of times, and I think really the only time I've heard anybody ask about Mallinger was the time that I heard you ask about him, Forrest, on the when you texted into the Neil Brown show. So I agree. Seems like I don't hear too much about those two guys, and they're two guys that could be important, especially Austin Cave at the linebacker position right now, as we need some depth there. So that's pretty much all I got. You guys, I encourage you guys one more time. If you got anything else you want to talk about, drop it there in the chat. I will touch on your all's comments one more time before we close up shop here. But I hadn't got a chance to do it yet this week, so I figured why not do it here on the stream. Go ahead and discuss the PFF grades for West Virginia. You guys know I like to do the feature every week, giving the top 5 player grades on each side of the football. So figured let's just do it live here on this one. So let's take a look at the top 5 highest player grades for West Virginia, both on offense and defense in the game against UCF, according to PFF. Let's start here on the defensive side. And coming in at number 5 for West Virginia was Malachi Ruffin. Talked about him in this game, not only playing the cornerback position as he has all season, but having to play some safety as well, and ended up grading out decently, 70.4 to come out as the 5th highest graded Mountaineer player on defense. And he's really done a good job for the West Virginia secondary this season, just being consistent more than anything, and that's all you can ask for. And how about this one at number 4, coming in as the 4th highest graded Mountaineer on defense against UCF, Jacoby Spells, 71.5 defensive grade, playing the 17 snaps, and really did a great job in this game, filling in at cornerback at times when they did shift Malachi Ruffin back to safety to try and, spell out those deep safeties when they needed to. And how about spelling Malachi Ruffin and doing it admirably? And you like to see that. And here's a guy with, a super high ceiling, and I think he's only going to continue to come into his own at this position, and we're going to see him play more and more, probably not only through the latter portion of this season, but even further on his Mountaineer career. He's only at the tip of the iceberg of what he can do, but glad to see, him not only look good to the naked eye out there, but to grade out well, according to PFF, also coming out as the 4th highest graded Mountaineer on defense with a 71.5. And then at number 3, I like to call him Steady Eddie here on the Mountaineer defensive line, and that's Eddie V, the Mountaineer defensive tackle. Done a great job this season, being consistent. That's why I call him Steady Eddie. And he comes out with a 72.0 defensive grade in this one as the 3rd highest graded Mountaineer on defense. Made some big plays in this game, and I thought, the biggest of which was probably one that forced a turnover for the Mountaineers at a critical time when it looked like UCF could take control of the game. And I think that's something you can say about the West Virginia defense performance in this game overall was there were several times where it looked like, UCF was going to take control, but the Mountaineer defense made a play and, made an impact that really turned that tide back and, shifted that momentum back in the Mountaineers' favor. And Eddie V helped provide one of those plays, getting in, providing a pass rush, hitting the arm of John Rice Plumlee, which led to a Marcus Floyd interception, one of the 4 turnovers West Virginia would force on the day. So you love Eddie V making plays there, and he grades out high because of it with a 72.0 grade. Third highest grade Mountaineer on defense. And then number 2, another guy that had one of those impactful plays, and that's a guy that's had impactful plays since he came to West Virginia, and that's, of course, Lee Koba. Had a great game at the linebacker position, leading the team in snaps there on the defensive side at the linebacker spot, as usual, and he grades out highly there, 80 defensive grade from PFF. And I mentioned those plays where West Virginia had that really shifted the momentum back in their favor. And Lee Koba had maybe the biggest one of the game there because it allowed West Virginia to finally, take control there in the second half and was a big reason they were able to go on what was a 17-0 run that spanned across the end of the third quarter and towards the late part of the fourth quarter. And that was because West Virginia finally got ahead and UCF had to play from behind and pass the football more than they wanted to. And one reason they were able to get that advantage was Lee Koba coming in on a blitz. You mentioned West Virginia ran the blitz a couple other times in the game, didn't quite get there, but this time it opened up perfectly for him. He saw he had a chance at the football, not only made the sack, but knocks the ball out of John Rice Plumlee's hands. Jalen Thornton recovers, and it's a game-changing play made by one of your best players on defense and one of your team leaders, and he really stood out in this game. Grades out well, second highest grade of Mountaineer on defense with the 80.0 grade. And then the highest grade of Mountaineer on defense, this one's awesome to see too. His cohort, Ben Cutter, playing the Mike linebacker position, 85.6 defensive grade. And here's a guy that, playing as a true freshman, thrust into the action more than he probably expected, more than the coaching staff certainly expected, as he was the guy that they probably wanted to, work in easily, play him, a handful of snaps and really kind of ease him into things. But following the injury to Trey Lathan, had to play a ton. You saw in the first couple of games following Trey Lathan's injury, just making some freshman mistakes out there. But you see the learning curve for Ben Cutter is not going to be very steep. He's a quick learner because already a couple games later he's having, probably his best performance that he's had yet. So really bouncing back in a big way in this UCF game. They got Caden Boswian on the action to spell him a little bit, and I think it kept him fresh, especially late in the game, and you saw him really perform well because of that. Racked up a good bit of tackles and made a lot of important plays for West Virginia, including another TFL, something he's done recently for West Virginia, and he grades out high on PFF because of his performance. Actually, the highest grade of Mountaineer on defense against UCF with the 85.6 grade. So those are the top highest grade of Mountaineers on defense. Let's flip it over and take a look at the highest grade of Mountaineers on offense. And we just keep seeing these freshmen pop up on these grades for West Virginia. So awesome to see these youngsters, and just goes to show there's a bright future for West Virginia if they can keep these core of guys together. They've got a lot of bright spots on the defensive side that are playing, that popped up in the grades there. They've got, some that are even out with injury. They're going to be big time, playmakers in the future when you look at, Lathan and Trotter. And then on the offensive side, they really have some impactful true freshmen that we're going to see here on the offensive player grades from the UCF game. Starting here at number 5, a fan favorite since he committed, West Virginia with a big recruiting win to get him to commit. He's a top 20 recruit all time in West Virginia football history, in terms of rating. And, he's really shown why this season, contributing as much as he has as a true freshman. And in this game, we saw him, get some of the most touches that he's had in that true freshman season. And he did a lot with them, looked good to the naked eye, and yet again, grades out well on PFF as well. 5th highest grade of Mountaineer on offense, Rodney Gallagher III, 67.6 grade. And it's another guy that you're just seeing, the tip of the iceberg, because his ceiling is just through the roof. So it's going to be really impressive, the potential for him the rest of his career. And can't wait to see what he does, not only for the rest of this season, but throughout that career here at West Virginia, as he comes out as the 5th highest graded player on offense in this one. Then at number 4, the 4th highest graded Mountaineer on offense. Talked about him a lot and kind of sung his praises. I said he's the most underrated offensive lineman for West Virginia, and I think that's Thomas Remack. 67.9 grade in this game. Not only grades out well and really performed well, and I think was a big reason West Virginia's rushing offense had probably their best game in quite some time, was that left side being back to form with him and Wyatt Milam there together. But you can't fail to mention that play that, kept West Virginia from having another turnover when a fumble comes loose and there's several UCF players around, but he's able to dive on it, beat them to the ball, and secure it. Just really important play that, won't necessarily show up on the stat sheet for Thomas Remack, but was very impactful in the game. And he made a lot of plays that did show up on the stat sheet and led to him having a nice grade there as the fourth highest graded Mountaineer on offense with a 67.9. Then you get into our top three, and it shows how good West Virginia played in the running game in this one, because all three of these guys have 80-plus grades. And that, of course, starts off with C.J. Donaldson, who we've talked a lot about, needing to bounce back, and he bounced back in a huge way. 80.3 offensive grade, led the Mountaineers in rushing, really had, I thought, probably what was his best performance of the season. 17 carries, 121 yards, and a touchdown. Really great yards per carry average, something we've been looking for him to bring up. And he really ran hard and ran tough throughout the whole game. I think what stands out to me is there at the end when West Virginia is running the ball, when they know it's coming and you're trying to close out the football game, when West Virginia was still able to do that, and C.J. Donaldson was still running very hard, literally carrying a defender on his back all the way down to the 10-yard line on a 30-plus yard run there to close the game for West Virginia. So he ran hard from start to finish. Bookended the game with 30-yard runs. His first carry was on a 4th and 1 where he, had 30 yards, and then that one that I just mentioned there. So great performance from start to finish for C.J. Donaldson. Hopefully he continues to look like that for the rest of the season for West Virginia, because if he does, they're going to be scary good as he comes out as the third highest graded Mountaineer on offense with the 80.3, and just ahead by a 10th of a point there, Garrett Green, old GG here, number 2 highest graded Mountaineer on offense, 80.4 grade. Can't say enough good things about him in recent weeks. In this game, they really put a lot on him. The coaching staff said gave him the most, they've had in the Reed game this season. He did a lot for West Virginia running the football, ran for 3 touchdowns in this game, the most rushing touchdowns by a West Virginia quarterback since Pat White in 2008. So Garrett Green's really doing some special things this season, and I think he's proving to be a really special player, more so than maybe anyone expected. And Garrett Green can lead West Virginia to a lot of wins, and hopefully he leads West Virginia to a few more throughout the remainder of this season. And I think he will if he continues to play well, both throwing the football and running the football as he did in this game, to grade out highly, second highest graded Mountaineer on offense with the 80.4 grade. And he's really doing the little things right, and he's managing the offense well, staying mistake-free for the most part. And that's, something you don't see on the stat sheet. And that's something that Garrett Green brings. He just has that kind of intangible it factor to him that stands out and is going to lead to a lot of wins, I think. So that's why I say the things I say about him having the potential to lead you to wins. And you loved his performance and you love his grit all the time. You love it in this game, especially after he went down with what you thought would be an ankle injury that would keep him out. Not only does he return, but he returns and leads the team to a double-digit victory on the road when they were an underdog. And a lot of that is because of his performance, 3 rushing touchdowns. So you love to see it from Garrett Green. And then you also love to see it from another West Virginia running back. And we talked a lot a minute ago about a bunch of true freshmen popping up here. And how about this one? Maybe the most impressive of the bunch. He's the one that I've been waiting on to break out. I've talked about it's really coming, guys. It's going to happen for Jaheim White. I've been singing his praises since the offseason. Put out one of our more successful videos on the channel here, naming him a potential breakout player. And I think that he's shown that to be the case. Probably gotten the most action of, most any true freshman on West Virginia's roster, and continues to show why that is the case, that he is the freshman that they've chose to, have that role, because he's just so explosive that you can't keep him off the field. 85.2 grade, easily the highest graded Mountaineer on offense in this game. His yards per carry average continues to be impressive, and he just gives you that different dimension that you haven't had at running back in quite some time at West Virginia, and no one else in your running back room right now really gives you. And that's just that speed and the ability to break off, a potential home run, to, those explosive plays. He looked really good. He did that several times in this game, got some explosive plays. But I think we're just seeing, the start of what could be with Jaheim White. I think you could see this guy really break off some big plays in the future of his Mountaineer career. Hopefully some happens this season, because some are definitely going to happen over the next few years. Hopefully we get to see a few more over these next 4 games, because I think his role is going to continue to increase over these next 4 games. We're at the point of the season where these true freshmen are really coming into their own, and no one may be coming into their own more than Jaheim White, the true freshman West Virginia running back. 85.2 offensive grade, phenomenal performance from him and the West Virginia rushing offense in general in this game against UCF, as he comes out as the highest graded Mountaineer player on offense in this 41-28 win over the Knights. And you love to see the rushing performance from West Virginia, 286 yards, so nearly 300 on the ground. And if they can continue to be that strong with, Jaheim White and CJ Donaldson both as threats, and both as threats in different ways, plus you got to worry about Garrett Green hurting you with his legs or West Virginia attacking you downfield, this offense certainly looks like it's tough to stop, and could be a good rest of the season for West Virginia. So that's pretty much all I got there, guys. Definitely wanted to touch on the player grade since I hadn't got a chance to do that yet. Touched on the injury updates, updated the snap counts, and provided my projected depth chart for the Mountaineers this week. But appreciate everyone that tuned in here live, or if you're watching this on a playback, we appreciate that as well. Like I said, hit us a like before you head out. It helps us a ton. And if you're a West Virginia fan, be sure and subscribe here. Plenty of football content still coming at you, and basketball content coming heavy as well, as both of these sports are intersecting right now and happening simultaneously. It's going to be extra content for you guys, so be sure subscribe to us here on the CRW. But catch up with your all's comments one more time, and then we'll get ready to wrap up this stream. Absolutely, Timothy. Can't echo those statements enough. If you guys haven't yet, definitely check out WVU Football Going Deep, as it is there on the screen. You see the name of his channel. He really is putting out some great Mountaineer sports content there as well. So if you're a WVU fan and you just can't get enough content, there's another place where you can find, some of the best around. For sure. Forrest really does have some great information on his channel and on his show. Knows what he's talking about when it comes to West Virginia things. And he says here, if Spells can play the rest of the season, that will make a big difference. Indeed, it will. We really do need, somebody to help out, Beanie Bishop and Malachi Ruffin a little bit, because we don't want them to get worn down late in games. We've talked about that, in the games against Oklahoma State and even against Houston. West Virginia got worn down some late in those games, and that's why you saw them trying to combat that at the linebacker position. I think it really helped Ben Cutter in this game, and they'd try to do it there at the cornerback position also. Malachi Ruffin, moving back to safety, get a chance to do the same thing for Burks and Wilson on that back end, and then also you get Spells in there. So hopefully Spells can play. It'd be great if Wilson Lamp could work his way back into the rotation. You got a chance to really get Bishop and Ruffin both, off the field at times. But at least if you have one guy there in Spells, you can bring him on, for a handful of snaps for Ruffin, one series, and then another series, a handful of snaps for Bishop. So still find a way to get both of them at least a little bit of rest, which is better than none, because West Virginia is just paper thin right now in the back end. So got to do what you can. And sometimes, as Jordan Leslie's mentioned, you got to worry about robbing Peter to pay Paul as well, because you got Marcus Floyd, as the reserve player at kind of, 3 different positions almost. So it's kind of hard to get, those guys to break right now. And that's the issue West Virginia's running into. But they've been creative, as of this game against UCF, and finding ways to, get guys a little bit of rest. So hopefully they'll be able to, continue to work that out moving forward. And definitely, Jacoby Spells playing more would make a big difference in helping a lot. Timothy Green says, it looked to him like CJ ran harder this game. I'd 100% agree with that, Timothy. I think that CJ mentioned today in his interview that he was kind of fueled by, I guess, not being the starter anymore, and kind of getting the message, from the coaching staff that he needed to step up his game, or he was going to fall down the depth chart and potentially lose carries. And I think the threat of that, allowed him to really, step his game up and kind of get into that, mindset mentally to get that hunger back that he needed out there on the field, and really, ran angry is what they kind of talked about. And that's what we need from CJ, is for him to run like that. So whatever they got to do to get that, switch to turn on in his mind is going to work. And if that worked for this game, awesome. So whatever they got to do moving forward to replicate that, do that, because CJ's running like that and you got Jaheim to complement him, the speed of Jaheim to go with the power of CJ, that's tough to stop, especially when then Garrett Green can pull it at any time and take off on you as well. Definitely. West Virginia, a lot better team when CJ's running that way. W Football Going Deep says Green still has a higher ceiling. Imagine if he makes a couple more correct reads and completes a couple more passes. Of course, he's doing really well. Of course, he's doing this well because he was brought along carefully. Great point there. Didn't risk, getting him involved too early. Really waited until he was ready, until he could handle a lot of the things that they're asking him to handle in the, option game, the RPO game. And they put a lot on him this past game, they said, read-wise, and he really performed well in doing so. I think even some of those plays where West Virginia was running tosses out of the shotgun were option for him to potentially pull that. You saw a quarterback run element off of that. So, RPO involved in a lot of the West Virginia plays, and it seems like he's making the right reads there. But as you said, still does have a higher ceiling because, the intermediate passing game is the thing people have, said is the negative with him. His deep ball is beautiful. And, you saw that a couple times in this game. There were some crossing routes over the middle. I think to Cole Taylor at least once or twice that he missed. It throw was slightly behind. So certainly still a few things that he can clean up. And, the fact that he still has a higher ceiling is what's really impressive and really just makes you wonder how good this West Virginia offense can be if they ever can get, the offensive line all healthy and playing all at once like they had earlier in the season, now that they seem to have everything else clicking. Because when you had the offensive line healthy, you didn't really have the offense clicking the way it has been the past 3 games. So, just as a West Virginia fan, you're just waiting, kind of licking your chops for the moment where you get that healthy offensive line, you get the 100% healthy Garrett Green, and, everything going great. It could really be, something to see, and hopefully we see that in the near future. But Green definitely does still have a higher ceiling, and it's really exciting as a West Virginia fan that he does. Yes, did you hear C.J. Donaldson say that Oliver can hit 22 miles per hour on the GPS? Wonder what White hits and where they compare with Horton. From what I understand, 23 is really fast. So I would guess that White and Horton are somewhere, probably hitting 23. But the fact that Oliver's hitting 22 is crazy impressive. I've mentioned since he came in that I thought that he was C.J. Donaldson, but even faster, because he has that same body type. He's around, 230, 240 of his own. But he really, on film and stuff stood out. I think I'd heard it reported that he ran, a 4.5 40. So I wasn't surprised that he's running fast, but 22 miles per hour is really moving. So I was surprised that it was that high, but I'm not surprised that he's fast because I thought that he was like a more faster version of C.J. Donaldson. So, we're talking about C.J. and Jaheim together, but really DJ and Jaheim together too. They're going to be playing together throughout their careers. And now I'm interested though, because 4 games left. I think DJ played against Duquesne, so he can play in 3 more games and still redshirt. So is that someone West Virginia sneaks onto the field against Oklahoma, somebody that they don't have any film on? I would not rule that out. We've seen Neil Brown do that and try and break out some stops against Oklahoma in the past, especially in Norman. Like I mentioned that 2021 game earlier when we played them close. That was the first time we really saw Garrett Green play extensively. So I would not be shocked to see DJ Oliver get in to the running back rotation one of these Final 4 games, or at least a couple of them. And against Oklahoma would be a great time to break that out if you got some secret package for him or something, wouldn't it? But yeah, that's really impressive to hear C.J. Donaldson say that DJ Oliver hits 22 miles per hour on the GPS, guys, because this is a guy that we're talking about, 6 foot, or he's not the height of C.J. Donaldson, because what C.J. Donaldson's like 6'2". DJ Oliver's, 5'10", 5'11", but still the same, near the same weight, 230, 240, and running 22 miles per hour. So he's a guy that's going to be really impressive. Another true freshman that West Virginia found, and they're doing a great job finding these running backs that are, underrated, I guess you could say. CJ, of course, wasn't a running back recruit, but he was underrated as a recruit in general because I think he was a bit positionless. No one knew where to fit him in. And then DJ Oliver was, a lower 3-star guy that wasn't heavily recruited because he came from a very small town in Florida in Port St. Joe. And then same goes for Jaheim White. Can't believe that guy wasn't higher rated with the crazy stats that he put up. It's probably just because of his size, being, 5'7", I believe is what he is. But man, that guy's crazy talented. And West Virginia's done a good job, recruiting that position. And it's going to pay off. CJ, we've seen him. We've seen Jaheim. And just wait till we see JJ Oliver from the sounds of it. He says Horton the fastest, Clemson at about 22.7 is number 2, White likely close to them, but 22 miles per hour with Oliver size is insane. Yeah, it absolutely is, man. I can't wait to see him once he finally gets on the field. Going to be a lot of fun to see that guy get involved. The West Virginia running game been great this season and seems like it's going to be great, and maybe set for the future as well. And speaking of the future, going to have plenty of content coming out here in the near future on the Country Roads Webcast channel. Going to have our BYU preview and predictions episode releasing over the next coming days. And then, of course, this Friday night, we'll get back here to chat live with you guys for our prediction stream where we get your all's prediction for the game against BYU and chat with you guys again ahead of that one. So be looking forward to that. And we're also going to release a CRW Hoops podcast episode in the coming days. And then, of course, we'll be live with the West Virginia football post-game show there immediately following the WVU BYU game Saturday night on the West Virginia Voice of College Football channel and the Big 12 Voice of College Football channel. And then, of course, kick it back up for another week next week with another review podcast and then another snap count stream like this one that you guys just tuned into. And really appreciate you all doing so, whether it was live or on a playback. Be on the lookout for more content from us here on the CRW, and we look forward to getting to chat with you guys again live later this week. In the meantime and in between time, check out our UCF review podcast if you haven't already, and be on the lookout for a BYU preview podcast. Here are our predictions for that one, and then we'll come back, chat with you guys on Friday night, get your all's predictions for that game. Looking forward to that one and looking forward to a fun Final Four games for the West Virginia football season and to getting a chance to talk about it with you all throughout Mountaineer Nation. Having said that, as always, I'm Jordan Cruz, and until next time, let's go Mountaineers.